We are back in the shop with the 1962 C10. Last time you saw the truck, we were on the dyno. We made great power. We did run into small issues in search of more power. We ran out of fuel system. So we're gonna be upgrading the fuel pump. It's got a single in-tank 330 liter per hour pump at the moment. And we're gonna put two 360 liter per hour pumps, a combined total of 720 liter per hour, which should be plenty enough to feed this beast at 10 pounds. We are going to be going to the back of the truck and pulling our fuel hat, and hopefully we can use the fuel hat that we have and just modify it to hold the pump setup that we want to put in it. Here's our pump hanger right here. So what I'm gonna need to do to add a secondary pump, I'm gonna Y the pumps inside the tank. So I'll have both pumps feeding into a single feed line coming out, so we won't have to change our feed. This is already a -8 line, so it's plenty enough volume to feed the engine. And the only other thing that we need to add is a second bulkhead here for our wiring, so we can plumb the second pump. So what I have here is basically a universal pump setup from Holly. It's got our socks on the bottom. You just rest the whole unit at the bottom of the tank. You can see it does Y into a single outlet, and then I have here my two feeds for the pumps. So I'm gonna start pulling that pad out of there so I can see if this guy's gonna work for us. Got our pump removed, and immediately off the bat I'm already noticing that our hole isn't gonna be big enough to fit our dual pump setups. And it seems like already, I haven't even put it over here yet, but so close. Looks like we're gonna need a different solution because that guy is not gonna fit in there. So now that I know that the pump's not gonna fit, I'm gonna have to make a little bit of a modification. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of disassembly because I'm gonna need this Y fitting here, and then I'm gonna have to get some submersible fuel line here. Standard fuel line won't work in a fuel tank, it'll just fall apart. So you definitely have to get the one that's rated for being submerged in fuel. So everything's separated here now. To get these two pumps into the tank, they need to be butted up 100% against each other, or else they will not fit in the hole that I have here. So when they're fitted up next to each other like this, it fits, boom. So I'm gonna have to make it a little bit different. So what I've done is made the tab extremely low profile. You can see there's maybe 1/8 of an inch underneath there. That's just enough for the clamp to go by it. I'm gonna have two of these, one for each pump, split at about 45-degree angle here. Boom. Dave's gonna weld these on here for me. All right, came out pretty good. Dave, you the man. Now I'm gonna try to fit these guys on here and pray that it all works out. The pumps fit, so I just gotta figure out the orientation of my clamps properly, and this thing will fit no problem. Right on, Playboy. This whole setup is definitely gonna work. Got my brackets welded on. Finally was able to get my pumps on there in the proper location. I also took a measurement from the bottom of the tank to the lid, or the top of the tank, because we have to have these sticking out in the proper height. So I had a measurement of about 9.5 inches, and we are just over that. But then we have our gasket here, which is another 1/8 inch or so. So we are right on the money with the depth. I've got my clamps tightened down, got my in-tank style hosing here, and we should be ready to rock. Next thing I'm gonna do, I have a bulkhead here for my new connector to go through. So I'm going to drill out a hole right up next to the other guy so I can have power to our other pump. All right, so I'm gonna cut you there. That's gonna be our constant ground for the solid state relay. Power to the pump, we need you. So now the wires are routed over here. I've got the old relay removed. I went ahead and grabbed a piece of scrap metal and put a little break in it, cut some holes in it. And I'm going to mount this little guy right here, and I'll be able to mount my relay directly to the frame. Now we are all finished up. My pump is wired. I've got our relay all squared away. Everything's nice and tidy. And now all we got to do now is connect the battery, hit the key, make sure this got fuel pressure, and we're good to go.
Before we test out the new fuel system, we need to make some small changes. The exhaust system, which we had running off our headers, little muffler, short drop down. A couple little changes we want to make with that per the customer's request. They want it to sound a little different, get a little bit more chop, and then they would like the sound to be further away from the cab, because around town driving gets a little too drony and annoying. Two ways to achieve both of those things. One is make an X pipe, and then also extending the exhaust so it drops out the back. We got both of our couplers to transition from our muffler back to a pipe. As it comes out, transitions from the muffler, it runs parallel to the frame, because originally this was exhaust tip, but the frame kind of takes a dive inwards towards the end. So I made a cut here that has a little bit of angle to it. This straight piece, once it's on here, will dive away from that frame so it won't hit, and then be able to swing over and hit our X. I'm just gonna get this in place, tack it together with a couple tacks just to hold it. Do the same thing on the other side, and then we'll be able to see exactly where our X needs to go. Okay, so now that the X pipe is tacked together, you kind of see that with our rear end and where our differential is, there's a limited position where this X pipe could go. The X is going to dictate how the rest of the exhaust transitions from here to here. We need to transition over this cross member as soon as possible. This is way too low, and then we're getting past our lowest point with our exhaust. So we're going to cut this as short as possible on the front end of our X pipe, and that way we can have our transition start as soon as possible, and then we can start transitioning back. I got my one side tacked in. It comes out the muffler through the coupler, swings around here. It gets higher here as the frame gets higher, so that way we know we're not gonna be lower than that point. And then hits our X pipe right here with a whole bunch of pie cuts. From here, what I'm gonna do is, since this is all clamped in and stationary, nice and tight in a fixed position, I'm gonna start building from the driver's side over to the X pipe. So we got the first part leading from our mufflers to our X pipe all tacked up. We got one muffler here on the passenger side, runs up and over to the X pipe here. And here is the driver side, runs over and to the X pipe here. So our next step is to take these two ends of the X pipe and get them to make a nice exhaust all the way to the rear bumper. Have some 45s here. It's going to jog over from our X pipe this way and then use another almost 90 bend from here, and then we'll take our exhaust and come down the frame rail this way. So we got this X pipe all tacked in. We got our little turn down. Both sides are nice and parallel to the frame. We'll have a nice spot here to place our hanger. Before we do all that though, we're gonna do a lot of final welding. All right, so we just finished up our new X pipe exhaust. Got that pipe all the way to the back, which will help with noise inside the cab, give it a little more chop to it. We also got the fuel system all back together, and so there's only one thing left to do now, which is start this guy up, see how it sounds. So we got Andrew in here.
Hey guys.
You ready?
I hope so.
Fire it up. So Andrew, what's next for the truck?
We gotta take it over to the dyno. Yeah, do a couple last minute checks once we get it on the floor, and then we are taking it straight to the dyno and see what our upgraded fuel system can do. Hopefully it can keep up and make some better power than we had it doing last time. We are back at Blow By Racing. We've finished up with our exhaust, which sounds great, and we've also upgraded our fuel pump. So now we're here on the dyno, and we're gonna see what kind of power we can make out of our setup with this new fuel system. I'm gonna go with 683. So that's my prediction, officially. All right, so we just made our first pull, and we did pretty much the same numbers. I think the timing was pulled back slightly just to be on the conservative side to make sure that we're okay in the fueling department. So this is kind of like a baseline. We're gonna send our log file over to our tuner. He's gonna make a couple more revisions, make sure everything was okay, and see where it goes from there. All right, we just finished our second pull. The numbers were a little bit down, but it seemed like that we had the wrong load settings on the dyno. No big deal, we just made a little bit of change to that, got the settings right, and the load is gonna be proper, so hopefully we'll see a large jump in the numbers, because it was reading at like 580 or 560 or something, which is way off from where it was previously. So we made that change, and now we're gonna continue on and do another power pull. All right, so we've taken another pull on the dynamometer, and things are not looking impressive. Power seems like it's way down, and not a little bit, like almost 100 horsepower, so that's very concerning. The engine's definitely running on all 8 cylinders, so we don't have an issue there. We pulled a couple of the spark plugs out just to make sure that they're not fouled out, and everything looks pretty good. So we're gonna try to adjust the load cell on the dyno again and see if we can't get it corrected. Just made another hit. Everything seems to be a lot more normal now, close to where we were at before, but torque is way up. So we've got our dyno load issue fixed, and we're getting back into ignition timing tuning, making a few more revisions. So we're gonna make another hit now that we've got the dyno load figured out. We just took another hit on the dyno. Everything's going smooth. Fueling is looking dialed in. Gave it another degree of ignition advanced, and right now we're sitting at 658. Power and torque is at 591. So we're still climbing considerably more than we were at our last visit here 2 weeks ago. Boost pressure, we maxed out at 9.7 pounds at 6,000 RPM. And we're revving the truck out to 6,200. So power levels were a little bit weird, and we decided to change out our plugs real quick because we're still running the factory plug. So we're gonna go a little bit colder. We're gonna go to a TR6 4177, gap them a little bit tighter, and see if we can't fix our issue here. So I'm gonna start pulling out the plugs. It's gonna be nice and gap them for me. Thanks, bud. try to pop the fuel injector rail. Looks like that's the end of the dyno session today. We had a big leak. All right, we're back in the shop. So I've got some spacers here to kill the gap that we were having. What was happening is that tightening down all the way, the distance, it was just enough for these to fit in here. But if they were to push down any bit, so usually under boost pressure, when the fuel pressure rises, it's enough pressure to push them down just a small amount, just enough where it would let the fuel pass the O-ring here. So it started spraying out actually on the driver's side over here. So we're really lucky that we didn't have a fire, thank God. But it's a simple solution. All I'm gonna do is add these spacers, and I'm also gonna have to raise my bracket up just a little bit. We got the fuel rail spacers in. Well, we are back from our test drive. We just put the fuel rail spacers in it and it was a success. As you saw on the dyno, it got a little wild at the end. Fuel rail popped up and there was a potential for a big fire, but that didn't happen. Everything was all good. And we were also still able to get a final number out of the engine. We made 687 wheel horsepower. So that's definitely a step up from our previous time on the dyno, which we're all super excited about. We are pretty much done with this truck. We have a couple little things to button up here and there, but don't worry, we still have some more episodes with this truck. You're gonna see this thing out in the wild and in action and putting that dyno power to the ground. So make sure you guys like, subscribe, and don't miss out on the next episode on the 62 C10, as well as all the other builds that we have going on in the shop. See you later, peace.